Ontario's top court has dismissed a challenge advocating for changes to the rights of sex workers. Now, the charter challenge by the Canadian Alliance for Sex Work Law Reform argued that Canada's prostitution laws violate the industry workers' charter rights. Justice Robert Goldstein's decision says the laws are constitutional and do not prevent sex workers from taking safety measures or seeking police assistance without fear of being charged. Now, the Alliance says there shouldn't be any criminal laws specific to sex work. For more on all this, I am joined by Ellie Adeker, Executive Director of Maggie's Toronto Sex Workers Action Project. Ellie, good to have you on. Thanks for taking the time.
Thanks for having me.
So what do you make of the ruling and the reasoning by the court today?
I mean, it's clearly a very disappointing day and finding for sex workers everywhere. But in terms of what we make of the finding, it's a 150-page decision, so we're still going through a bit of detail, but I find it quite patronizing. I mean, we've been able to provide substantive evidence that suggests that criminalizing sex work, restricting the ways that sex workers are able to communicate, and preventing them from connecting with people that provide key elements of safety, such as screening, drivers, and things like this, puts us at much greater risk for harm. The courts didn't uphold that today, but we're also talking about a judge who spent his life as a prosecutor, prosecuting people just like us.
Okay, Ellie, we are having a bit of an issue with your audio in terms of it breaking up a little bit, but I'll just ask you this next question too. How is the Canadian Alliance for Sex Work Law Reform arguing that prostitution laws violate workers' charter rights?
Well, when we talk about some of the laws criminalizing sex work right now, we talk about laws that restrict our ability to communicate in particular places, our ability to work with important third parties that keep us safe, such as drivers, such as security guards, people that can help with the screening process and provide those key elements of safety and security for sex workers, on top of the fact that the criminalization and the stigma around sex work impacts our work and our lives in nearly every social, political, economic context.
And for those who might not be familiar, can you just detail how this ruling might be dismissive of the realities that sex workers face on a day-to-day basis?
Right. So, I mean, within the ruling itself, there are some very practical things where Justice Goldstein talks about sex workers not understanding the nature of the laws that criminalize our bodies and are enacted against us specifically, which is deeply patronizing to those of us who have to navigate them. But also thinking about the fact that sex workers are persecuted under anti-sex worker laws right now. You can be arrested for communicating for the purposes of selling sex work. You can be prosecuted for working with third parties, trying to keep yourself safe, even working with another person. And so we're directly impacted in this way, but we're also being robbed of the ability to speak back and challenge some of those laws as well.
Do you think there's still a lot of misunderstandings when it comes to sex work and the general public?
Absolutely, I do. And it's precisely because of the findings, such as what Justice Goldstein presented us with here today, right? Language that frames all of us as unable to speak to the nature of our work, to the harms of criminalization, and to the impacts of some of these anti-sex work laws, as well as some of the stigma that would suggest that sex workers can't speak to the nature of our own work and our own lives. When we rob people of that voice or frame sex workers as all inherently victims, unable to really speak up for ourselves or our communities, we're being robbed of the ability to advocate for ourselves and speak truth to power, which is exactly what we did and exactly how it's counted by Justice Goldstein today.
So what comes next? Is there a plan to appeal this ruling?
So I believe that we have about 30 days to make that decision and actually get that filing in. But for now, the Alliance and all of the sex workers who participated in this process are meeting to regroup and to review in depth Justice Goldstein's 150-page finding.
Okay, and Ellie, just before I let you go, I want to check as well. I know there was some issues with Maggie's Toronto Sex Workers Action Plan, like the building you work out of. For people who might be needing your services or your help, is there somewhere? How's everything going in terms of the fire that happened last week? And is there a way for people to still access you? How are you operating at the moment?
So obviously a lot of heartbreak and devastation on our end as well. So around $500,000 in damages from the fire last week. For this week, our staff are taking time off just to grieve and process what's happened. But we're hoping to come back with some virtual services and potentially operating out of temporary space. We have also set up a GoFundMe, though, to be able to support in the revitalization of our office space, because we're on the hook for about $500,000 of damages. So hoping to rebuild.
Wow, I'm sorry to hear that. Okay, well, Ellie, I do appreciate you coming on today to discuss all this. Thanks for taking the time.
Thank you so much for covering this.
That is Ellie Adeker, Executive Director at Maggie's Toronto Sex Workers Action Plan.